This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Good to be back with everyone. So before we go to our regular Navi, I'll tell you just very briefly about the trip. We just returned from London. Baruch Hashem, we had the zchus to give shiurim in a number of mekayimos in London, in Golders Green, also in Manchester, but primarily in a neighborhood called Edgware, really a remarkable neighborhood of B'nai Torah, B'nai Aliyah, people really mevakshim, thirsting for the Dvar Hashem. It was really a pleasure to be there. This trip was arranged by my Yedid Nefesh, Reb Josh Morhaim, and when we landed, we were picked up by a very, very chashuva ben Torah, Reb Yaakov Grant, and he picked us up from the airport and he took us straight to one of the tourist attractions, the Tower of London. So now we did not have a lot of time there because there was a shir in the evening at an organization called Kesher of Rabbi Rashi Simon, also a good friend of mine. And we went to the Tower of London where there are many interesting things there. Well, for us, we wanted to see the Queen's Jewels. And we got in there. We had, 40 minutes there, 45 minutes. And it was a remarkable collection of swords and jewels and rubies and diamonds and all of the various kalim they used to coronate their kings. And it's jewels that date back, I think, as early as the 17th century. And what I found very interesting is the fact that the Chida, when he traveled through Europe in the year Tav Kuf Tesvav, so that's 1755, in Tammuz, the Chida himself traveled to England. He arrived in England, and I'll tell you, he came to the port, and he landed in the month of Iyar. The Chida was taken to the Tower of London. That's, just the thought of the fact that the Chida visited there is very interesting. And in his Magal Tov, in the entry of the date of the 12th day of Iyar, I believe, he records his experiences in the Tower of London. I'm going to read to you what the Chida writes about the Tower of London. And you think to yourself, why was he going there? What in the world is the Chida doing in a tourist trap? A Bittul Torah maybe. But let me write to you what the Chida says about the Tower of London and what he learned from there. Okay, so now among the friends that I had made was the Chazan, Rav David Castro. He possessed a hand and a good name. Presumably when the Chida says he possessed a hand, either he meant he was a good friend or he meant he was a supporter, yeah? And his words produce fruit and the fruits from the fruit, with the Gevirim. Meaning he was influential to be able to solicit funds. May the Lord remember it for his good. And there in the city of London, he took me to a castle called the Tower. And there I saw lions and an eagle 100 years old, and an Indian cat as large as a dog, and another cat, a hybrid with a wild one. So some kind of, bobcat, some kind of mix of cat and lynx, and other terrifying wild animals on iron chains. By the way, Rabbi Sai, this week is Parshas Vayera, and one of the chambers in the Tower of London is something called the torture chamber. And that is where they tortured criminals. And they had extremely terrible ways to torture people. Maybe I'll even show you a picture. Yeah, it was Mamish Sodom and Amora, where they had three rolls, and they would put someone in, so basically the person was bent completely in half. It's horrifying the way they would torture people. But anyway, the Chida continues. And I also saw an upstairs chamber, its length perhaps 50 cubits or more, made into many smaller rooms, and the dividing partitions are of guns and all sorts of other weapons, all arranged extremely beautifully in the manner of a wall with the doorway in it. And similarly, around the sides of the chamber and the ceiling, something marvelous, with a plenitude of weapons of war in their thousands, tens of thousands, and milliards, and the beauty of their order and arrangement according to their character and their stature. Now, the Chida is writing in a poetic way. Chida continues. I also saw there all the kings of England. So what does he mean? He saw all of the kings of England. The image of the likeness of their form out of iron, meaning he saw busts of them, he saw statues of them. Let's see if I can just find this. He says, "V'oid ro'isi kol malchei Anglatira, tselem demus tavnisam, miv barzel, made out of iron, roichvim al susim shal barzel, v'echad haroya lamara einov yishbod sheish v'hem ruach chaim lahafli." Meaning, if you look at it, it looks like they're alive. It was so realistic. V'kama malbushe shoyoinois, and many armors, right? Suits of armor. Miminim, nechayim, usadam, sukanim, eder vadai, arranged in separate herds. The Chida is writing, paraphrasing psukim in the Chumash. The kama mine kli melchama gedola ma'od, different weapons. Devaisi, frightening weapons, enormous in size, frightful, holding decorated shields, row upon row of weapons, buckler, cuirass, and shield, and they had captured from their enemies since England had existed. Many such instruments, all of them instruments diverse and strange. What does that mean, diverse and strange? He says, Kalim mi kalim shainim, right? Yira lahem v'goy lahem. Then, in one darkened room, there was a separating barrier of iron, and within, they showed us the royal crown. Okay, so they kept the crown in a very dark room. Keser malchus v'avnei nezer misnoitzetzes meleim ziv umfikim noiga heiruv rakim. It illuminated light. Meaning, even though there was no source of light in the room, the ruby, the diamonds themselves gave off light. The koishal zav, shabai moishchin hamelach, the golden goblet from which they anointed the king. We saw that they had a spoon there, from which they would anoint the king. The kiyotzim klechemda skulas mama. Hein kalela rasa eni meitzis min charakim. This is what all I saw. And my reaction, says the Chida, and my take on the jewels of the Tower of London is doyeg, worried, v'sameach, and joyous. So what's he worried about? And what's he happy about? And this is what I wanted to bring to your attention. Worried that, here you are, these people were not the finest. The kings of England were, many of them would marry Risham. They would get married so that their wife would produce a son, and if she didn't, he would just kill her. Right? Henry VIII. And many of them went through one wife after the other. They were barbarians. The kings were many of them were terrible people. So worried that why are these Rishaim, Madua derech Risham tzleicha, why are they being so successful? But ultimately Sameach. Why Sameach? Because the Chida is paraphrasing the Gemara at the end of Masechta Makos. What does the Gemara say in the end of Masechta Makos? That the Tanoim saw Krach Gedoili Shalroimi, they saw the great city of Rome, and they saw the success, and they saw the grandeur and majesty, and they were crying that why is Hashem giving the Risham such success? And Rabbi Kiva laughed. Right? This is the second story, the other story. And they asked Rabbi Kiva, why are you laughing? So Rabbi Kiva said, why are you crying? We're crying because why the Risham being so successful? And Rabbi Kiva says the following Kavachomer. Im la'ovrei ritzaynoi kach, la'oisoi ritzaynoi alachas kama v'kama. If those Rishaim who violate the will of Hashem are having such success, just imagine the reward in Olam Haba for the tzaddikim. So when you see the success of the wicked, it's supposed to be used as a limud, how much good is in store for the tzaddikim, la'asid, lavai. So therefore the Chida says when he sees the royalty, the majesty, the riches of these kings, says the Chida, paraphrasing the Gemara in Makos, Im la'ovrei ritzaynoi kach, la'oisoi ritzaynoi al achas kama v'kama. And then the Chida offers a tefillah. Hine yamim ba'im, days are coming, litzvi, for the glory, ulechavad, and the honor, lepleitas beis Yisrael, of the remnant of Klal Yisrael. That what? That we are hoping for the real royalty and the real majesty and the real grandeur, and that is the grandeur of Melech HaMashiach. Neinenu terena ruach apenu, may our eyes see the life of our nostril, Mashiach Hashem, Meir umazir, illuminating ka'ar hachama, like the light of the sun, Shevasayim, which will be 7 times. Mukhtar bekisei ksarim. Mashiach will have the crown of crowns, Kodesh Kadashim Hashem. Kain Yehirat sign, so may it be the will of God. So apparently the Chida learned two important lessons from visiting Tower of London. Number one, the success in store for those who obey the will of Hashem, and the yearning for the true Malchus of the Melech HaMashiach. I'll just share with you one other item that the Chida talks about on his trip to London, and this is quite interesting. Chida, in the year 5538, when he was, he traveled to Europe, he wasn't sightseeing, he was collecting money for the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. He said, Wednesday I heard an echo murmuring and saw the town was gloomy. Now the town is always gloomy because it's always raining, except when we went. Didn't rain. Okay, not too much at least. As a consequence of the drop in the markets in London. So the stock market in London was at a low. If you want to know what the market in London looks like, there's a picture in the Chida's diary of the stock market in London. And then the Chida says an interesting thing. He gives us some insight. Why was there a lull in the stock market in London? And that is because, let's see if we could find it. And all of this when times were uncertain and they were all suffering hardship because their activities were in shares and their capital was in London, where the markets were at rock bottom. For London was in chaos as a result of the war of the Americanos who had rebelled. What year is this? This is in the year 5538, 1777, 1778. This was during the American Revolution. You know the American Revolution, what year it took place, but you don't realize that it had an effect on the Gedolei Yisrael in Europe. And here the Chida was collecting money in London, and the stock market in London crashed because of the American Revolution. And he couldn't collect for the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. So I found that very interesting. Okay, Rabbi Sai.
The stock market in the U.S. went down when they wanted to leave the European Union.
That's right. So everything, like Rav Miller used to say, we say every morning in davening, Hu Hashem Elokeinu, B'chal ha'aretz mishpatav. We say in Haidu, He is Hashem our God, and all the land are His judgments. What does this pasuk mean? He is Hashem our God, and all the land are His judgments. Hashem does everything, but we have to realize He does everything as Elokeinu, as our God. Whatever happens in the world is because of Klal Yisrael. So Hu Hashem Elokeinu, He is Hashem our God, and as our God, B'chal ha'aretz mishpatav, He does everything in this world. So when there's the American Revolution, so that we can learn Torah, and whatever its effects are is for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Okay, shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.